My company, Kaleidoscope Digital, has been an innovator since the start of the World Wide Web and sort of multimedia, as it was called. And over that time, we've watched a lot of things change in this world. And as sort of veterans of the first dot-com hype and meltdown, we often see a lot of what's happening today and think that it smells of the same sort of hype and desperation as people try to pander whatever new business model or new future that they may have as sort of their giant play to take control or their big slice of the media futures moving forward. But this time around, I honestly do believe that there is a sort of seismic shift in the way both people are consuming information and entertainment, and equally in ways that people are producing information and entertainment content. As producers in this room, filmmakers, directors, writers, it's really important to start looking forward and thinking about how I can take my creative process and my creative practice and move it forward into this new world. And you want to do this for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that I would like to put forth right now, and you'll see this in a lot of sort of the businessy stuff that we say, is that the traditional venues for getting your stories out there through television, through film, are experiencing a tremendous downward pressure. Anybody who's had to negotiate a broadcast license with a broadcaster recently realizes that they are being incredibly aggressive with the rights that they want for the same old license fee. This is making your job as a storyteller more and more difficult as far as actually trying to make a living doing so. And I believe that the industry will continue to change in this direction to the point where the different sorts of avenues that we're going to elaborate upon that allow you to reach an audience are going to become more and more attractive, even if they still are highly speculative. So the purpose of this whole talk is to take you guys, who have, as I know many of you in the audience, have a wide range of experience and knowledge about exactly what new media is, and try and move you into a mindset where you have sort of a broad overview of some of the different things that are happening out there. We will be using specific cases, and hopefully this will get your creative process going, both from a content perspective and from a business perspective, so that you can start engaging this fabulous new world, because I really believe there's some wonderful opportunities out there to get some very interesting stories told, some very interesting things creative, and to have that connect with an audience. Now, we are very, very lucky to have my friend Mark Pesce with us here. Mark is just not only an incredibly knowledgeable and smart man when it comes to this and many other fields, but a fantastic public speaker, one of the most engaging speakers that I have ever seen in my travels to different conferences around the world, and also a swell guy. Mark is an author of some renown. He's written several articles in magazines that you may have heard of, such as Wired. He's written several books. Your book, Playful World, was a fantastic success. Mark is also one of the fathers of virtual reality, as he was one of the co-creators of virtual reality markup language.
VRML.
Mark also started the entire sort of digital program at the Australian Film School in Sydney, and has since moved on to create his own technological consultancy called Future Street, which is doing a lot of really interesting strategic work with clients both in Australia and around the world. So when Mark came up here, I had sort of my 2 cents worth about my views on the whole thing, but I realized that it would be far more beneficial to everybody here just to let Mark give as much of a brain dump on his views of things as possible. And I'm just going to try to help interface that with the agenda that I just mentioned. So without any further ado, Mark has sort of a few opening statements that he would like to make before we sort of start going into examples. What we'll do at any time, if anybody has a question, raise your hand. We'll do our best to answer it. And at the end of this whole session, there will be quite a lengthy question and answer period. So we really hope you enjoy this. We really hope that you sort of open up your minds and think about, after seeing all these things that people have done, what can I do to start really playing in this new world? So, Mark?
No pressure. Thank you so much, Steve. It's been my great pleasure to work with Steve on any number of projects and things over the last couple of years. And I mean, every time I actually get to sit and talk to him about these things, I learn something new, and we'll probably come to talking about that with respect to YouTube, something that just happened at lunch. what I want to do to start with is to set the ground by talking about the way the distribution has changed. Now, whether you're working in film or in television, distribution is the vehicle by which you, as a creative producer, get your creative product to the audience, right? It's the essential sort of middle point between the audience and the creative producer. Now, all of that has very, very recently changed, and it's changed in terms of a word that has been picked up in currency called hyperdistribution. So let me take you through the history of network distribution of media. So, in the 1940s, when television stations started popping up in Canada, in the United States, what would you do? You'd buy airspace from whatever regulating authority you needed. You'd put up a broadcast tower and you'd start broadcasting a signal. And it would cost you, as the broadcaster, a fixed amount of money, whether one person was watching or 10 million people were watching. So obviously it was advantageous to you to have as many people watching as possible because there was no incremental cost per viewer. And that's the way the world was for many, many years. And then in about 1995, early 1995, we started to get to streaming media on the net. And the first thing any of us probably saw in this room would have been real media. So you would have gotten your little sort of postage stamp-sized video of someone doing something crazy, or maybe it was a movie trailer, whatever it might be. And the infrastructure for this was relatively straightforward. You'd have a web server. The web server would have the media on it. Someone on their desktop would open up the client application. It would talk to the web server, and the bits of that media would come into the computer. They would stream into that computer. Now, the interesting thing about this methodology is that there is an incremental cost involved in that distribution. If I have a piece of media and there's one person watching it at a time, my web server is going to be able to handle it. What happens if it becomes the item du jour and all of a sudden 1 million people are trying to get to that piece of content right away? All right. Now, I don't know if any of you saw a flash video that was going around America just before the general election called This Land. All right. By a company called Jib Jab. It was released in July, and someone forwarded the link to me in late July, and then someone else forwarded it to me in early August, and then I got a few more people forwarding it to me in late August, and then my mom forwarded it to me in early September. And in this span of time, 70 million people had seen it. And Jib Jab was really excited by their success, and they also got a $243,000 hosting bill from their ISP because it was being streamed through the netcasting way. So there was an incremental cost associated with every viewer. And it really wasn't until the beginning of September that they decided that they needed to stick a little ad in there so they could get some revenue for eyeballs based on that. So most of that was just money that was flushed down the drain. Now, it put Jib Jab as a production company on the map, and they followed it up with a couple of pieces. None of them have been quite as popular as This Land, but it put them on the map as a production house. So maybe it was a useful investment, but at the same time, there's a $250,000 hole in the ground because of it. All right. Now, all of you probably remember Napster. Now, Napster was the beginning of what they might call peer distribution. Napster was also really relatively simple as a technology. You'd install Napster on your computer, it would find all the music files on your computer and make a list of them, and then send that list up to a big centralized database. And everyone who was running Napster would check into that database, provide their own files, and then you'd be able to search based on an artist's name or a song name or whatever it might be, and you'd get a list back of all of the computers that had those files on it. And then you'd click on a particular instance of a particular file, and the file would download to you from that other computer.
So you've just offloaded the whole cost from your server to the other kids that you're downloading and sharing files with.
Exactly.